Aloha. Aloha. You can tell how many people are local just by that alone. Who here is visiting from outside of Hawaii? Please raise your hand. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Very important topic, and I want to thank Dick Palmieri, president of FCA Hawaii, for agreeing to put this on the docket, because this is something that really isn't talked about enough. Welcome to building the cyber workforce in the Indo-Pacific, navigating challenges and capturing opportunities. I'm Cheryl Cross, I'm your moderator, and I'd like to extend just a special thanks to you for coming and really being part of this dialogue. Our goal is to create a dialogue. We have a microphone here, but this is a small room, so I'm pretty sure you can raise your hand, and if you speak loudly, we can hear you. So please interact. If I don't see you, throw something at me, get my attention, okay? I'll do my best. Let's jump in so I can introduce you to my very special guest. It is my privilege and honor to introduce you to Jason Chung. He is a retired Colonel, U.S. Army, 06, Executive Officer and Commander serving USARPAC and U.S. Forces, Korea. Jason has served in both tactical and soft units and held additional roles within the interagency. On retirement in 2019, which really wasn't that long ago, he's accomplished quite a bit, including forming his own consulting practice. He also served as VP of Premise Data in Silicon Valley. He continues his consulting as a top intelligence and cyber advisor. He is the co-founder of the Hawaii Defense Alliance, where he co-created the Pacific Intelligence Initiative, or P3I. You'll hear a lot about that today. Jason is currently VP of the MAC, the Military Affairs Council for the Chamber of Commerce, Hawaii. Welcome. Thank you, Jason. Next to him is Brian Green, Senior Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton. He leads the cyber efforts in the Indo-Pacific. He is a champion of workforce development. I know this because I had the pleasure of working with him in 2017 when he and his team came out to the Indo-Pacific to help us build our cyber workforce pipeline. He is in the Indo-Pacific full-time now, as of 8 months, right? And Brian and his team support the DoD cybersecurity, cyber capability development, and the security of next-generation network architectures such as zero trust networks and 5G mobile networks. He is a former U.S. Air Force person. He came in as a pen tester to Booz Allen. Oh, I must add, he was also a president of Ponte Tech in Virginia, and he's come back to Booz Allen as a senior leader. So thank you so much, Brian. Next to him, I call her Mo, but you might know her as Marilyn Oliver, 20-year veteran working with proposal and capture teams, including former principal and director of Booz Allen Hamilton in the Indo-Pacific. Mo has worked on many C5ISR solutions across air, space, land, and maritime, and cyber, as well as PED capabilities. Marilyn, or Mo, we call her, is the president of Hanu Solutions Group, a small women-owned business, and she supports other small businesses contracted by the DoD and federal government, including 8A Native Hawaiian organizations, where she often integrates them with her larger prime and subprime contracts. Welcome, Mo. Al Ogata is representing our civilian workforce. I'm very proud of this. He's a former CISO with HMSA, the largest health insurance carrier in Hawaii. My firm, Inkinen, got him that position, so I'm very excited to have him here. We're still begging for permission and forgiveness from HMSA for that. He spent 18 years there, and by leaving as CISO, he led a bit of a, what we call puka, that's a hole in Hawaii. He also spent a significant time, 20 years, in Silicon Valley in California with leading companies like Hewlett-Packard. He is now, where did I lose it? Hewlett-Packard. He is now the CEO of Cyber Hawaii, a nonprofit supporting small and mid-sized businesses in building cyber resiliency. All of my panelists are tremendous advocates for civilians, excuse me, let me try this again. All of my panelists are tremendous advocates for workforce development, but Al is pulling the thread for our civilian workforce by advocating for civilians to support other federal agencies such as the FBI and other relationships with DHS and CISA. Welcome, Al. My name is Cheryl Cross. I'm not going to read about this one. I am a Workforce Development Councilwoman for the state of Hawaii. One of my colleagues is also here for workforce development for the state. I'm very proud to be here. I've been working in this AOR for about 7 years now, and I've been able to see some of the challenges and some of the benefits of working here. And this is why we created today's forum. Let's jump in. Again, if you have questions as we move through the room, I want you to raise your hand, stand up, or come to the mic. But we're going to start with something that's very polarizing, and that is the elephant in the room. I'm going to ask my panel, and they can take turns answering, what is the elephant in the room regarding the recruitment of cyber talent in the Indo-Pacific? Why is it that despite a clear demand for skilled professionals, we continue to face significant challenges in attracting and retaining them? What fundamental issues must we address to create a more effective workforce pipeline? Who would like to start? If you don't raise your hand, I'll pick on you. Okay, Brian.
So I think there's a couple. One of the obvious ones is someone who just recently moved out to Hawaii, I think, is the cost of living, right? So we start talking about building a cyber workforce and that sort of thing. I think it's easy to think about, oh, we're talking about seasoned, retired military personnel, that sort of thing, been here a while. But when you try to put yourself in the shoes of a brand new college graduate, you find an entry-level GS job, an entry-level even government service job, the salary is likely not enough to be able to live independently here in Hawaii. And it's probably the same, but I think in Japan the exchange rate's really good right now for the US, right? But it's not always that way. It's expensive to live here, and I think that's something that we can't go around and say, oh, just add more money, right? The government's just going to have to pay more. That doesn't usually happen. So I think that's a challenge that we have to be creative in how we solve. I think before the session here and some of the calls, we've had some discussions around potential ways to do that, but I do think it's something that we probably should think harder about how we make it not just affordable, but viable for sort of that entry-level cyber expertise to stay here, work and live here in Hawaii.
More than selling pineapples, coconuts, and hula and beaches. It really is tough. I've moved hundreds of people to the Indo-Pacific AOR, including Hawaii, and I can tell you it's a bit of a sales, but it's really very mission-driven. How many of you have served in the Indo-Pacific, except for Jason here? Raise your hand. And how many of you are serving and continuing to serve because you served in the military? And this is what we love. So as we look for targeted solutions, I want companies here to think, how might they really focus on these people who have served in the AOR, who have challenged themselves to work in this AOR before the Pacific Deterrence Initiative poured money into this AOR. You were working with very little, and the largest, most challenging AOR for the military. So now there's money, there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of need and demand. So think of other people like that, and how might you target them? Let's pull a little bit more on this question about the elephant in the room. Al, I'm going to ask you to speak about the civilian workforce, maybe some of the things that you're trying to do, and what are the challenges you're seeing as you try and build this civilian cyber workforce?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. One of the realities is that cybersecurity professionals are in short supply. We really don't have enough of them, whether it's military, federal government, state government, private sector. So given that, people who are in the field have their choice of where they want to go. There's jobs in different parts of the country, so they can pick and choose. So in some senses, we have to give them reasons why they want to be here. And in many cases, we unfortunately focus on some of the negatives, some things that are, obvious, like cost of living, as Brian said. But part of the opportunity for these folks is that we're in an AOR that's extremely active in the world from a cyber standpoint. A lot of the news talks about, the Russian sector, or Iran. But the reality is, in the Indo-Pacific, we have challenges here that are equivalent, or in the future could be potentially more devastating than those parts. And somehow, for a security professional, and I know this from the private side, a lot of them don't view Hawaii as a real exciting place. It's like, Indo-Pacific, nothing going on. I go there, my career is like, I slow myself down. And I'm not sure if that's the way in the military as well, but in some senses, we have to give them a reason to come here. Tell us why you want to, tell them why they want to be here. Give them a reason to feel that they're going to be challenged. And you all know cybersecurity is not one person. It's not, just, okay, I got the best of the brightest and they're just going to take care of everything. It's a team sport. You got to have people working, and they can be local, they can be stationed overseas, or they can be on the mainland. So part of the challenge, I think, is being able to ourselves say, we know how to manage a diverse team. We know how to manage people who are here in the room, who are who are remote in another country, and who are also maybe in a center of excellence, because military has quite a few centers of excellence. So part of, I think, the advantage that the military has over the private sector is you have resources you can call on, and those resources need to explicitly be part of the team. You can't just say, oh, we have 5 people here, and that's my team. The team really is people around the world, the fact that you have secure communications, the fact that you have coordinated. Private sector, some big businesses have that, and that's what they take advantage of. The people I talk to now, smaller businesses, they don't have that. So they struggle with trying to figure out, how do I mount an adequate defense? How do I get the right people in there? So that's my challenge on a day-to-day basis. But I think other than salary, cost of living, which everybody faces, no matter what you say, you have the opportunity to create a picture for these folks and get them to want to be here, get them to want to ply their trade in the Pacific. It's a challenge.
Thank you, Alan. Let's flip from civilian to military. Jason, I rely on you to give us the military aspect. You haven't been out of the military long, but you were in it for a very long time. And you have certainly contributed to this AOR enough to know the challenges. Why don't you speak on that?
Good. Well, first I wanted to, do I really live that old? No, thanks. I want to build upon what both Brian and Al said, in terms of cost of living and some of the challenges. I view it really as a recruitment and retention issue, right? It's much broader than salary is a big thing, cost of living is a huge thing, but it's the recruitment and retention of talent. And it's not because Hawaii does not have the talent, right? That's a showcase right there. Tyler Lee, who was an intern for us at P3I, and then we sent over to the Maven Viceroy program there in Rome, New York, and was a standout with Jackson Kula there from Maui. So you have the talent here in Hawaii, right? But the challenge is, to a large extent, is the awareness and creating the supply chain, right? That takes folks at a very early time in school, right, whether it's in the K-12, where they get exposed to a cyber patriot program or something, and then what is next? What happens in intermediate school? What happens in high school? What are internship opportunities? What are micro-credentialing that can happen at community college level, right? And what is that pathway to an internship to a program like Rome, New York, Viceroy, Maven, where you're going through Envoy, Viceroy, and the ACE program, and you're stepping folks through experiential, but a progressive pathway, right, into a profession. And the example I like to tell everyone when we talk about what we're trying to do here in Hawaii is, if you ask anyone who grew up in Hawaii about Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, everyone knows about that, right? It's the largest industrial employer, employs 6,500 people. Only 500 wear a uniform. So that's 6,000 civilians, right, who work at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. They have the most successful apprenticeship program because over 100 years ago, when they established Pearl Harbor, they realized, man, it's really hard to get skilled artisans here, like, welders, pipe fillers, riggers, etc. So why don't we just grow them in Hawaii? So started the apprenticeship program. That program every year has about 100 to 150 slots opening up. You have to shut it off in the first 24 hours because there's about 3,000 applicants. So now, if you apply that, right, we're in the industrial age, now we're in the information and data age, technology age. How many jobs do we think, right, are available. If you look at IT, OT, cybersecurity, data science, intelligence, or just in the realm of cybersecurity here in Hawaii, I would argue there's more than 6,000, right? When you start to look at user pack, PAC-DAF, PAC Fleet, Mark Work Pack, SOC Pack, this thing called NSA Hawaii, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, because the SIOP program, it's all going to be automated, it's going to be 5G enabled. The requirements for that are going to be significant. So I think it's, how do we change that paradigm to say, yes, the cost of living in Hawaii is crazy, but how do we look at a very comprehensive program to get after the recruitment and retention of talent? And it first starts with the inform and educate, just three key audiences, right? The students, the teachers, and the parents, making them aware, and then we, the larger we, creating that pathway, right, for those interested young students to be able to follow that career path and that potential job placement.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Can I
Mo?
piggyback on that
Oh,
real
please
quick?
do. Please do.
So I think you said some really important things, right? You focused on really the missions, right? Not the cyber. I think that one of the challenges we get into in cyber, whatever cyber means, is that we tell people about cyber training, cyber this, cyber that. Cyber is an enabler, right? I mean, it's about what we're doing at port. It's about port operations, right? And securing the port operations is critically important. Somebody hacks in and shuts down our port operations for 2 days, we have problems. Logistics missions all across the Pacific are critical. Cyber is a component of that. If we talk about the importance of the logistics piece or the supply chain, that's the mission. If we talk about air operations or other land operations, I think sometimes in the cyber community, we do ourselves a disservice by focusing on cyber, right? Cyber skills and that sort of thing. And as we look at a workforce, if I look at, as a leader at Booz Allen, I look at my workforce of cyber experts. I have economics degrees, I've got psychology degrees, I've got history degrees. Those people didn't study cyber, but they know they have to learn cyber to apply it to a mission, and then they become an expert in that area. So I think if we can pivot a little bit to, tell this as we'll focus on the mission, if you will, that will help us out a lot.
Thank you for opening the aperture on this. I can't agree with you more, and I've been agreeing with you since 2017 when I met you. We need to think differently about this problem. I'm going to throw it up. We've looked at this in a big way, but we have to pull it back to proposal stage. I brought a proposal expert for this very reason. I'll open the floor to you to talk about the elephant in the room, which we have a lot. She joked with me. She says, we're going to be just talking about the first question for the whole hour. So if we do, we do. But I want to know, when we're sitting through proposal, pre-proposal, the proposal cycle is so specific. Where does creativity live? How do we get ahead of need? How do we prepare force readiness? I know the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, they all do it. But how can contractors do it differently?
In the acquisition world, and especially in proposals, right, it's working with the government. Industry needs to work better with the government in the acquisition cycle to influence the government, shape and position the objectives better, especially in the cyber world. It is so broad. Focusing on the objectives to make sure that we are focusing on bringing the best talent this way by telling them that you're not going to get what you want if you construct the exact statements of work, PWSs, limiting what you're trying to get here. If you enable industry to follow the objectives, we can give you the talent that you need and you want, right? And more acquisition, contract shops are opening the doors to looking at statements of objectives. If you allow yourselves to teach the government to do that and go into that route, right? So if you take the time to learn those types of contracts and you enable the government to learn those types of acquisitions and contract types, then the government is more enabled to allow industry, especially in this technology age, to go into building what industry thinks are the best tasks the best PWSs and statement of work to enable the best types of contracts and programs that will further the government faster with technology, faster talents and skill sets than binding us into Windows 97, like NAVFAC is still sitting in. Sorry, Julie. Right? And sitting there today, right? We can take them to today's age with the right skill sets and the right talent and the right cyber workforce than where they are today if we allow them the type of information and programs that they need instead of sitting in proposal land with the construct that they're sitting in because the contract shops are saying, well, I'm just gonna take what was on the shelf from 5 years ago and put 2024. All right, I'm good. Right? Allow your clients to learn what's today's type of acquisition, help them position that, help them construct that, and push that forward. And then you'll get what industry needs to do to help them move forward in technology, help them move forward in the cyber workforce, and then they'll get the best talent that's necessary, and they'll get the best value, and then we can help them build up the cyber workforce, and they won't be beholden to the hindrance of the cost of living of the cyber workforce that's in Hawaii and within Indo-Pacific.
Perfectly said. Hawaii fights in the top 3 for the United States for cost of living. It sits in the top 10 for the world. But a cyber position is priced correctly, and you're getting talent at the appropriate level, can afford to live here. They can. Because they fall in the well-paid tech roles that we're all trying to attract. So thank you to all of you who are bringing them. Brian, do you have anything to add regarding the proposal selection, this sort of pre-gaming this, because I know this is kind of where your heart is as well. Is there anything you'd like to add to what Mo said and maybe some of the challenges you face?
Well, I think, I agree with what Mo said. I think contracts have changed a lot too, and we've seen the introduction of OTAs, which have been pretty successful in a lot of areas, right? So sort of non-FAR based things where you can prototype solutions. And I think to think outside the box a little bit and think, and I guess let me pause here too, because sometimes I fall into thinking just about services, right? But if you look at the floor downstairs, there's a lot of products out in the world too, right? So figuring out what you need to have accomplished as a government organization, or what you're looking to do as opposed to how, explicitly telling a contractor base how to do something, I think you really limit yourself from the get-go. So, understanding what the mission needs are and thinking about what are the set of contract options to get to that place. If it's some sort of mission impact or capability, maybe an OTA that was for prototypes is a better way to go, right? Maybe there's another type of contract to get there, but I think that's some of the thoughts that I wanted to add.
Exactly. We've talked a lot about the cost of living, and we probably will continue. So let's really floor it. The high cost of living in the Indo-Pacific, specifically Hawaii, is a well-known challenge, but how are companies creatively addressing compensation benefits or relocation support to offset this issue? This is a challenge for people who have bid on contracts but didn't put relocation or repatriation into the contract because they're underbidding. So this is a big, big burden to clients or to those contracting companies. Are there approaches that military leaders could adopt or promote within the DoD to attract talent without drastically increasing costs for the whole, not just the contracting companies, but the whole? Jason, could I ask you to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, to build upon what both Brian and Mo said too, right, it's not just from the contractual side. There is a big part in terms of DoD, it's all the parties, right? So it just gets back to whether you're talking LCAT levels and incentives to be able to move, but also your PDs. When you look at your PDs, right, by default, they'll say they have to have a bachelor's degree, ideally a master's, X amount of time in service or experience. And especially now when you're looking at the age of micro-credentialing, the ability to be able to do things, and the evolving technology is happening so quickly. While there are other ways to be very creative, both in terms of how contracts are written, as well as duty descriptions for government employees, to be able to bring in folks at an earlier stage, because I think a part of it too is if you can bring folks in earlier with the right incentives, then you can actually grow them into those mid to junior levels, which are very difficult, regardless of contractor or regardless of government employee, to fill in Hawaii, because again, right, it's a cost of living issue. So if you Google it, right, it'll say cost of living in Hawaii is like, for a single person, $61,000 or $67,000 a year. I would say that I think it'd be pretty hard to live on $67,000 a year based upon what rent is, unless you've got two good friends who are also making $67,000 and you're all living in a one-bedroom apartment or something. But it's looking at that. So to specifically address your question, there are some commands that are being very creative in the way they're attacking this problem. They're realizing that it's very difficult to hire a GS9 or 1011, right? Especially if you're talking a cybersecurity professional. So what they're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm going to take a GS12 billet, GS11 billet, and I'm going to break it down into a GS7, GS9, and GS11 billet, and I'm going to hire someone, right, at Chaminade University or University of Hawaii, who's maybe at their junior year, it's on their path to get a cybersecurity degree, and bring them on, right? And I'm going to invest, because I'm going to train them also, I'm going to get them the security clearance, but we're going to train them, so by their second year, maybe they're now a GS11. And so you're recruiting early, bringing folks in, you're giving the training, you're seeing that they're in an environment that they're getting mentorship and leadership. You know, is that a way to kind of get after it? And for some commands here in Hawaii, that program is bearing some fruit, because they are able to now fill some of these entry-level positions with extremely qualified individuals. And as we all know, especially in today's day and age, right, if you get a cohort talking among itself, that is probably the best messaging that you can have, right? Where people go, wow, you know, how did Jason get that, job? You know, why can't I get a job like that, right? And when you find out the experience, then you start to figure out, okay, what are the different pathways and opportunities that are out there?
Agreed. Anybody else like to hit that subject? Brian, Al, Mo?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. So there's some other creative ways that some amazing companies, one of them's in the room, I won't say who, but have come up with compensation packages, right? Some are for those who are military vets, who have been in Hawaii, who know how to kind of play the game and the cost of living, some who are not, but they've come up with creative ways, for those who have families, who know that they want to put their kids in the education system, they know that they don't want to be in the public school system. They've come up with packages to make sure that they can afford to put their kids into the private school system, right? So, and that's something that's really critical, right? They know that they don't want to be in the public school system, so they come up with an education package so that, it's something that is amazing. They're like, hey, my kid's education is really important. I really don't want to move to Hawaii because it's my kids. It's the education piece, right? I'm willing to go there. I know what the salary is going to be, but it's this piece. That education package is an important piece. That is the thing that's the driver for a lot of families. That benefit is the clincher. That is a creative way to absolutely get them here.
Now, you can't work that into a proposal, can you?
No, but you can absolutely work it into a key person that you want to get to Hawaii.
So, and your KPs definitely work that in. All right, well, yeah, please.
Because I don't want to make it sound like, right, it's all negative, right? There's a lot of positive, and there's a lot of folks in the industry, and an example I gave where some of the commands are doing some very creative things. I mean, when I look in the room, right, there's 4 industry partners that I work with for what we're doing with P3I that have found very creative ways to kind of bring in interns and kind of cultivate that here, right? Ashley, Booz Allen's right there, Chris from Huntington, Wayne, right, Hui Lau, and then of course Charlene from MC3, which is really amazing, right, because they're a small company here locally, but they have all figured out ways, to navigate exactly what we're talking about and be very, very successful. And then what we try to do is at other companies, right, that we're trying to inform and kind of educate about this, we kind of like say, hey, there's companies that are doing this. They're figuring out the security clearance issue. They're figuring out, okay, how do you do it for a scholarship versus an internship so that the government, there's not a legality issue, right? Providing free services to the government, et cetera. So there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of folks who are kind of pulling together to kind of do that. We just have to continue to kind of share the best practices on this.
Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else on the panel want to add?
I would just add that, to me, if you provide somebody with sort of a longer term or midterm plan, as opposed to just focusing on, okay, this is what you're going to do immediately in the first year, right? But hey, and I've seen some government organizations do this really well, right? You can come in as a 9, go to an 11, 13 spot, 12, 13, whatever, and you'll rotate right through different jobs, different positions. Younger folks coming in can look at that and say, okay, well, yes, I'll start at 67K, but I can see a path for myself over the next 3 to 5 years that I'll be in a really good spot there, and it's worth it, right? So I think a lot of folks can look at that as an investment in their own career development, and they'll be willing to stay. And then you get to that mid-career, and this is a great place to be, and if you've got, you're now at just 12, 13, or a contractor, what have you, it can be affordable.
Thank you. Al?
Yeah, a couple other things to add to that. The first is the boring one. When I was hiring folks, we call them job descriptions, I think we call them PDs. Invariably, the first line in all the job descriptions was bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience required, desired master's degree. Because a lot of companies now use resume screening software, a lot of people that equivalent work experience causes some on resumes not to be sent through. So I ran a couple cases where people said, I sent my resume in and I looked at their background and said, yeah, I want to talk to you. Then HR said, well, we screened it out because it didn't meet the criteria. So what I hear companies talking about now is being more specific on equivalent work experience. AA degree plus a ISSP. A high school degree plus CISP plus CompTIA A plus whatever you're comfortable with. And then for people who aren't cybersecurity professionals, it's easier for them to look at it and go, okay, let's send this one through. The manager can decide what they want to do. And that's kind of the boring piece of it. But I think you get the structural part improved, and then maybe you start to see more candidates. Maybe there are candidates out there, just not seeing it.
I can't foot stomp this enough. As a recruiter, I've sat in proposal, wins and read through the LCATs myself and saw in lieu of a degree, 7 years of experience, but yet it didn't make it to the job description. So how many people were disqualified by that? It's a lot of words to put. It's a couple sentences. It's a little clunky looking. I agree. It's not a bachelor's degree, but it's really delineating a large part of your candidate pool. So thank you. We're gonna lead into the technical side of this because I know that's what you're all wanting. But before I do, I want to pause and ask if you have any questions for the panel on this. Go ahead. And please say who you are and who you represent.
My name's Bill. I'm from Oceanet, small business here in Honolulu. I have a comment that I'd like to make about what's been spoken about, and then I'm curious to know if any of you have any thoughts. There's another challenge facing the youth that are growing up here, which is that it has historically been very difficult to find well-paying jobs that would allow them to stay with their family and stay where their family's been for generations, oftentimes, and they're compelled to leave. And so my comment is, I wonder if maybe we can solve one problem with another by engaging more. And Jason kind of hinted at this, and I'd like to emphasize that I think there's potentially a mutually beneficial solution. My observation has been that the big defense contractors and whatnot that come out here, we've been hearing about retention and attracting talent and overcoming the adversities and moving here. None of that really applies when you're talking to people that grew up here and already understand it. right across the hall, there's a bunch of high school students and even middle schoolers today who have really impressive work that they've done and really want to share it, really would like to be able to stay here with their family. And I wonder if part of the solution would be focusing on that more, engaging more with STEM programs at the secondary level, and here in Hawaii and here in this AOR, as opposed to focusing on how to recruit people to move here, because there's talent here.
Al, do you want to start with it, and then we'll jump to Jason?
I think that's, observation spot on, and there are a lot of programs that attempt to work with K through 12, especially at the high school level, to try and get them interested in cyber. We work with Laley High School quite a bit, and one of the challenges the cybersecurity teacher has there is that cyber is an elective. So he has to get kids interested in doing this or doing something else, and he definitely says he can use help, showing the kids why it's an appropriate career, showing them, so it's a starting point, I think other part is really, shoot, I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about early exposure programs and the importance of them.
Well, it's partly that, it's also partly opportunities, as you said, to work here, and building up that experience is a key part of it. And one of the things that I read was that the White House had put out a edict, the cyber director, national cyber director, to focus on skills-based hiring versus degrees. And there's a pilot, I guess the pilot program ran this year. I haven't heard the outcome, but really that's the focal point for local folks here who want to stay here. They want the opportunity to work in the field. But again, then we get back to the boring part. It's like or equivalent. How do you get hired with or equivalent? And that's where it becomes something that has to be a little more practical, in the sense that, as Jason said, there's hundreds of job opportunities, but we have thousands of folks who want to take advantage of it. How do we expand to get those folks the opportunity they're looking for, and then we build the work base? One other thing I wanted to mention was that there's a company we work with, Solution Partners, who has client companies on the mainland who attempt to hire people who live in Hawaii on a remote basis as a way to give them work experience in the cyber field, application development. And again, that's a recognition that as long as you structure your team properly, you don't have to have people physically in one spot. So it's one way to get around that initial shock of, hey, for an entry-level position, I don't make enough money to live here. But maybe if you can get a job with a mainland company, get experience, get that level where you have that certain value, but still live in Hawaii, then you can rotate over to, say, other careers that are here at a higher level that give you more chance of living in Hawaii and making a family. So I think there's different ways that are involved.
Agreed. Thank you so much. I know Jason is just chomping at the bit here because this is what wakes this man up in the morning right now. This is his mission.
Wake up, he doesn't sleep. That's all he thinks about.
So why don't you go ahead and take the floor and talk a little bit more about what you're doing and how other people might be.
Thanks. Yeah, well, the first thing I'd like to say is that the four companies I talked about earlier, BDH, HAI, Blue Loud, MC3, are just four examples of companies that do pretty, and I know OceanNet does too, very extensive recruitment here locally. If you just look at the different things you're doing with engagement, with the different programs like Cyber Patriot, right, going to hosting teacher externships, so public school teachers being able to go to the different facilities, kind of see things, as well as reviewing folks like going to the C2 facility at Indo-Pacific, and all that is a part of strategic messaging, a part of recruitment, right, and showing people here, local talent, that there is a pathway to be able to come work at DoD fields and jobs without having to don on a uniform. So I think, right, that is growing. I agree with you that it needs to expand. But that was one reason why we stood up the Pacific Intelligence and Innovation Initiative, P3I, right? It was specifically to look at how do you take, right, kind of the Pearl Harbor from the industrial age to the technology age, and looking in terms of skilled artisans, into right, the labor workforce for cybersecurity and those other kind of efforts, and working very closely with Department of Defense, working very closely with industry, working very closely with academia to be able to do that, and state, local legislators, employees, congressional delegation, because we are at a very pivotal time, right? When you look at the contracts that are out there and the requirements that are existing, right, to support this region, and there's no reason that Hawaii should not be the center of excellence for this entire region and a lot of different things. But we're going to have to kind of pulley together, right? We're going to have to work together to be able to do this and have a very comprehensive and deliberate plan to kind of move forward, to kind of work together, very complementary. So I think we're all kind of moving in that direction, and you know, P3I is, we're going to go on our third year here in 2025. We think we're kind of on that path now, right? Because momentum is starting to build, and we've got a lot of great team in terms of network, in terms of those different key participants. But we're always looking for additional, right, defense industry partners to kind of pony up and host more interns, more opportunities so we can expose them, as well as on the defense side, getting more interns into the different, you know, commands, whether it be PAC Fleet or PACAF or et cetera, right, to kind of expose the folks here on island to the different opportunities that exist, as well as building in readiness and resilience to the Department of Defense, right? Because that's, when you get back to the retention piece of the recruitment and retention, that's what it's about, right? It's about the readiness and resilience too, also of the defense industry here in Hawaii.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks. So earlier this year, I had the opportunity to attend the intern outreach at P3I, and I really want to thank you for what you set up. I mean, it was amazing to me what they did. One, I think it was the team from Hawaii made a comment that we didn't even know these types of jobs existed here in Hawaii. Right? So I think the awareness piece that you're getting that bill is critically important. And so I know Ashley, you know, was called out for some of the stuff that we're doing at Booz Allen. We're involved with the Mark Cuban Foundation, right, which teaches to high school students. They can apply for, it's a 3-day seminar over 3 Saturdays, I think, one in the fall, one in the spring, to learn about AI/ML, and they get to choose one of 6 different tracks. I mean, one is computer science, but there's also healthcare, economics, and others, right? To learn about that technology and then understand that, hey, there are those jobs here on Hawaii. And it's I think, just that knowledge that exists, they can stay, I think will set up a spark, and then they'll look for opportunities, and I think that will really help.
The state of Hawaii calls it the workforce of the future. And we've been saying that for the last 5 years that I've been involved in the workforce development initiatives for the state. Thank you. Any other questions from the room? Go ahead, sir.
Hey, well, my name is Trevor King, captain over at the local contracting shop. So, how you doing, guys? So my name is Captain Trevor King, the director of operations of our local enterprise sourcing squadron. So I know that coming from Lifecycle Management Center, coming from AFMC, PACAF has not been important in the procurement side for a long time. It's been all the CENTCOM, and now all of a sudden we're switching over, because right now we don't even have R&D funds in PACAF. So my question to you guys is, especially with the way we've entrenched ourselves with AA companies and small business companies, how is it that the contracting shops can work with the Booz Allens and the larger businesses to figure out how to develop a statement of objectives that doesn't restrict you guys?
There's different ways. We can talk through different contract types. There's different ways to find funding. UFERS, end of year funds, well, that just passed. But there's different ways to find funding, definitely through, it's definitely hard out here, but there's always funding out there. And absolutely, folks like myself, that's always looking at where it's going, Jason included, we're always looking at where the funding is going, and how to help you get it funneled to you, and then how to help you get the right talent through, and working with the Booz Allens the 8As, other businesses, other small businesses to get you the support that you need, and then onto the contract vehicles that you want to use or need to use to get the services for the products, the mission needs that you have, to get what you need. So.
Yes, thank you, Will. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your question. Do you have more to add?
I did briefly, and I think, you know, the Air Force, I know, I've supported Air Force Cyber for a while, and there's a fair amount of AA and small business contracts. Having run a small business for a few years, a 30-person company, there's tremendous value in what a small business can do, the innovation they can bring, and the agility that they have. And I think there's definite value in those direct contracts, right? But they're focused on specific input or outcomes and that sort of thing. There's also tremendous value from what a large system integrator type of company can do, right? Working with a lot of those small businesses. So I think the ability for PAC effort acquisition shop like yourself to look at what you really want to achieve in the mission, right? How do you want to help the workfighter here in PACAP, and what needs to be done? Sometimes there may be unique sort of niche things that we can go to small businesses, or perhaps there's a way that you can craft in the contract vehicle requirements for, you know, small business participation. The funding's going to get to the small business one way or the other, but going through, I think, a large system integrator, one of the things I've found over my career, again, on both sides, is that the LSIs typically have a broader view of things. You're not going to get sort of duplication of effort. A small business may have a really innovative way of doing something, but somebody else may have done something similar, cheaper, better, faster, it's already applied, that sort of thing. And so I think thinking through what you really want to get done, and then what's the best mechanism, to your point, Mo, to do that. You probably may pivot more majority to large business contracts with requirements of engaging certain numbers of small companies can achieve the same sort of financial benefit for the small business sector as it would with all these individual small business contracts. If that makes sense.
I want to raise the hands of any 8As that are in the room. Could I please get a representation? All right. Look around. There we are.
And that's why you talk to me, because then I can help you revolve what your need is, and then we can figure out what you actually need and who you want.
So if there's no more questions from the floor, we're going to, oh, Ashley, please go ahead.
So I think, hi, I'm Ashley. I'm Ashley Lang from Booz Allen Hamilton. I think another piece to the internship program is, you think about the people who these students have daily contact with, who often inspire them to be interested in something or in a career, and those are the teachers and the educators. And I think educating the educators is actually equally as important as educating the students, because they are the ones who will plant the seeds of idea, of passion into the students. And so the DOE, I know, is working really hard to try and build out not just student internship programs, but educator externship programs. In other industries like law enforcement, the teachers will spend a week with the HPD to see really how it works. They'll spend a week in the hospitality industry to see how, so that they can translate what they learn into their curriculums. And it's not just us telling them, oh, you need these skills and these are the types of jobs, but in their mind, they know their children, they know their lesson plans, and how to make sure that the information they receive is translatable to their students, and then able to teach them in a really real and applicable way. These are the careers and futures that are possible for you. So I think I would encourage you all to not just offer the student internships, but opportunities for educators to learn, both at the K-12 level as well as the university level. We are at the forefront of the technology and the evolution and the innovation of the technology, and who better to invest in those teachers so that they can teach our future and bring up the talent so that we can then hire them.
Excellent point. Thank you, Ashley. Is there any other workforce development folks representing companies in the room? I know a couple have left because they have another appointment. All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Oh, Sarah, introduce yourself. Stand up. And tell us who you are and who you represent.
I'm Chris Loftus. I'm with Huntington Mills Industries.
Thanks, Chris, for coming.
Did you have a question? You just asked.
I want to know, I'm so proud of the companies. I'm so proud of the companies that are putting workforce development as a title and giving it the honor that it deserves. Workforce development is such an old, blue collar kind of mindset, but it really is very essential that we do. You want to talk about some of the programs that you're doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Ashley, born and raised here in Hawaii, like Jason, I just want to figure out a way to get my friends' kids into this industry so they don't move to the mainland, right? There's tons of opportunity. Even I, a career military guy, didn't know defense is the #2 economic driver in the state. So I started getting involved in this stuff. And it also just makes the work really, really easy on a daily basis as you get to go do these kinds of things. Yeah, the company itself, we are a workforce development company. Most people don't know HII builds aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, but that's all takes place on the mainland. So there's a very good kind of foundation within the company to be motivated to produce a workforce over there. So it's kind of easy. My company allows me to do this without a lot of restriction. So yeah, it's an easy thing to do.
It's a wide open field, isn't it? Yeah, lots of ideas in the room. Thank you so much for standing up and introducing yourself. We're going to take a pause and go to the next question unless anybody else has one last question on this topic. Okay, so let's talk about the technology and how quickly it's going. Cybersecurity is evolving faster than many traditional workforce pipelines can handle. How do we ensure that workforce development programs don't become outdated before staff or personnel are ready to deploy? This came from a general, by the way. These questions were all from people that are in this room. Can you share innovative educational models that maintain relevancy in a fast-moving field? I think we've touched on a lot of them, but really the question here is pace. How do you stay relevant? And what is that? Who would like to start? Al?
I'll just give an example, and some of you are familiar with this. Many companies support the continuous learning education credit model. So some companies put that into, say, a job requirement to maintain certain, credits. And I know that for professional certifications, that's a requirement. So one consideration is to do that in the cyber field as well. Basically say, you need to take whatever X number of courses, certain certifications, and demonstrate certain continuous competencies that keep you at the forefront of what's going on. And so that's just a suggestion. That's something to consider for putting into, again, requirements for the position, requirements for promotion, requirements for continuing on in the career field. So.
Thank you. And Cyber Hawaii, who Al represents, is a wonderful resource for you, so please do look them up. Anyone else on the panel would like to address? Brian? Jeff Dixon? I'll let you do thumb wars. Come on, who's first?
So I think that's a great question. I think it is very challenging. We look at that fairly closely, right, in terms of what is the curriculum and curriculum gap assessment, based upon what the defense industry or what the end user client needs. And what we're finding is we also work an advanced manufacturing initiative, and it's very, very similar there, right? When you look at the trades, and you go from an academic setting, someone who's teaching welding versus someone who's actually a welder or a master welder, right? A master welder who's working in the shipyard can make a lot more money than someone who's teaching at community college in terms of how to weld. How do you bring in expertise from that field to be able to teach students so they really get the type of education and mentorship that they need? And it's the same, we're talking definitely within the cyber realm, data science, et cetera, right? What you can make in the commercial sector actually executing operationally versus teaching, there's a significant gap. As well as in terms of currency, in terms of what is being utilized out in the field versus what was just in the academic setting. So what we're finding is that the organizations that have basically got industry to realize that if you want the quality of folks to come into your organization and already be operating, and it's regardless of area, it could be cybersecurity, it could be IT, OT, it could be data science, it could be intelligence, it could be welding, it could be machining, right? You have to have some type of investment from the industry into that curriculum to round it out. So there's an operational experience component to it, so you're able to leverage that. Internships can kind of do that, but it's more apprenticeships that really get after that, right? You're not gonna necessarily you'll get exposed in 6 weeks, but that's why we're looking at now is like, you know, an MOE for us should not be how many internships we do. That's just an MOP, right? The ideal thing is how do you string these different experiences together to actually kind of get after what we're trying to do, right? Is that someone who goes into that field academically has what they need in order to be successful, the foundation, that has an operational experience, right? Ideally directly from industry and the end user, that's really going to round out, right, their total, you know, curriculum and their total experience in terms of their education before they get into industry.
Thank you. And I will make a note that, you know, the registered apprenticeship programs, we call them RAPs, are incredibly difficult to get. And you'll see companies sidestepping this by saying, our apprenticeship program, but they can't use RAP because they're not certified. Getting through that certification hurdle is really hard, but this is incumbent on you all to create that platform, to really onboard. Again, I'm gonna call it early exposure. If you're willing to reach people earlier than you need them, this is where we all win because we have engagement. I believe Jason and, I'm sorry, Brian, and then, well, why don't you go ahead?
Great, so I think I was going to talk quickly. Micro-learning, I think, is critically important these days, right? So the days of long courses and you know, multi-week away from work, I think that's no longer. So I think that the ability to take 30-minute courses, maybe 2 hours on topics and a variety of topics is really useful. So you know, there are a lot of different providers out there. Booz Allen makes available, I think it's Udemy, I've heard it pronounced a lot of different ways. And even for you know, normal citizens, if you look at Udemy, they have regular sales for great courses around AI and other things that could be, you know, $9.99 or something like that. So you can get those micro-learning courses. I think all the organizations ought to make sure that you're really emphasizing that metrics and culture of continuous learning, like you said, Al. You know, we did this in data science years ago. We had something called Data Science 5K, right? The idea that we put 5,000 people through a data science curriculum. Now we've transitioned that to AI, ML, right? So we've got lots, again, micro-learning sorts of courses that you can take 15 minutes a day, half an hour a day, something like that, and build that in to your workforce to help people learn those foundational skills. Because I think within the cyber workforce, and again, I always go back to, it's the mission, not we do ourselves a disservice focusing on cyber. There's a foundational set of things that everybody needs to know, regardless of what you do, right, around data and basic cybersecurity hygiene types of things, and then you apply that in whatever mission you're in, right? And so training people on that, I think, is key. The last point I wanted to make around kind of community workforce sorts of things. I started an ISC squared chapter back in Central Maryland, so your CISSPs, that sort of thing. We thought it was just a good way to do, you know, maintain your continuing education credits. But what I found was being around the community and networking in those sorts of events. We had people from NVIDIA there, we had people from, you know, healthcare companies, banks. You learn a tremendous amount by getting out of your silos that you're in every day and talking to those people. And so I think that helps sort of the day-to-day learning and not necessarily book learning is equally important.
Go ahead, Mo.
So I wanted to take this back to Captain King, especially just as an example. So you'll get PTSD on the actor formerly known as FedSim does this, and we've actually gotten other acquisition shops to do this, but make it a requirement. Make it a requirement for the companies that you work with to make the cyber workforce put those micro-learnings in, put those certifications in for the subject matter experts, the senior level, and even the mid-level, right, cyber workforce, have those certs, have those, right, those elements of skill sets and certifications that are required to keep updated every year, right? So that they're in front of the technology, they're in front of everything that is coming forward faster and faster in the cyber area. You know, whether it's in the, I don't want to say offensive cyber, but the defense forward, right? Because we don't do offensive cyber, right? We don't. We do, but we don't. Right? But in all of these cyber areas, right? Make sure that
from an acquisition perspective, the government is putting that forward and asking the companies to put their staff forward so that the government is ahead of the game. Right? Put the onus back on us to make sure that we're providing you the best workforce.
If I can add to that, I've seen some really creative ways to do that from the company side. That the expectation within 30, 60, 90, however many days is that they achieve. So, you know, we were talking about delineators, right? Not everybody has these certs. The G certs in cyber were just the biggest ones because they were so expensive. And unless you were coming from the military and they paid for it, forget it. So the expectation for them to get this within a time frame opened our aperture to receive more talent. So again, this is all about thinking more creatively, and hopefully we've more than answered your question. We're at our Q&A part, and I just want to say thank you. I promised everybody that I'd get you out so you can go grab your lunch. But this is the time to ask any question. It doesn't have to be on the board. You have 4 of not just my favorite people, but really true experts who are willing to network with you, solve, and really shape solutions. Even if you are the competitor, you know, Booz Allen's very open to talking about their processes as long as they don't, you know, sell the farm and talk about secrets. But, you know, it's all about, you know, us working together. This is really mission driven. So please ask a question or I'll call on you, because I know a few people in the room. Bob, you've been quiet. Bob Litsky is the Vice President of the West for Booz Allen Hamilton, also Workforce Development Council person. Would you like to add anything to this conversation, sir?
Well, Jason, I know you've been very involved in some of the things we've done around internships and the, you know, the longer engagement with the students. But I think the things that where we partnered with industry, with HII, and Booz Allen, and some of the other companies, as well as the state, to bring together those internships. And I think one of the things that stood out to me was seeing how things like cyber, like data, like AI, they were not unique to the defense industry. And they were really ubiquitous across society, really here in Hawaii. Anything that maybe you want to share about that process of bringing those internships together?
Yeah, that's a great comment, Bob. And you know, just to kind of give everyone context, the first internship summit that we did, right, we had some companies that aren't typical defense companies that were there. So let's say like Servco, Bank of Hawaii, et cetera. And how we knew like the event was very successful is that regardless of the interns, so if they were from Booz or they were from MITRE or from Hui-Hui-Lau, wherever the interns were talking, you could see that basically everyone over the age of 40 was writing down notes about, you know, I gotta go talk to that person, right? And the business cards after the presentations just went flying because everyone wanted everyone else's interns because the talent was just, it was there, right? And it was interesting because the problem sets, I mean, it was all about data, it was all about cybersecurity or OT or IT or whatever, right? But it just, the problem set was a little different, right? Someone looking at misinformation in the South China Sea versus, okay, you know, how do I really, you know, understand kind of how effective our expenditures are as we look at, you know, doing a different kind of project. But it was basically just using the same sort of capabilities and skill sets to go after it. We haven't done too many of those after that because it's been kind of challenging to try to get the groups together, but it is something that we keep talking about is that the first 2 internship summits that we did, it was great to be able to get the bigger group together because even though our charter, right, is to specifically to support the defense industry and those skill sets, I mean, the bigger part, and you know, I'll steal Chris Loftus, he always says this to me, right, it's really just about trying to create more opportunities for the incredible talent that we have in Hawaii, regardless of where they go. And I would argue now, right, if you look at the importance of the critical infrastructure, right, for the defense industry, okay, right, the Pearl Harbor could be locked down in terms of cybersecurity, but if HECO or Board of Water Supply is vulnerable, it doesn't really matter, right? Because that's going to be the easy vector for any adversary to come into and basically our ability to strategically project and or sustain, right, in this region. So from a bigger perspective, stepping back, right, it's just the overall talent management for these critical skill sets and requirements that will support, right, basically our way of life here in Hawaii. Thanks for your question.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Before the panelists leave, I want to open the talk for clearances. This is something that we all individually talked about. When I worked supporting my alma mater, Booz Allen, in Los Angeles and San Diego before I was moved here, I rarely, if ever, saw a TSSCI. I worked on one flag project, and that KP had one, and I thought that was the coolest person I'd ever met. Because how do you get that? I come to Hawaii, and everybody's TSSCI. Rarely do we ever have clearances that are as low as secret, and if they are, they're just starting. Given the timeline between secret and TSSCI, what could we do differently? And I'm just going to throw this out here because I don't want to model it, because it's just something we all challenge. We're so challenged by it. So who would like to start?
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, right? Especially when you're talking cybersecurity at large, or in almost any of those fields, ITMT, right? Data science and intelligence, you very quickly. The other part of it is, even if you figure that out, the other challenge that we're getting to is this, is how many Department of Defense facilities have multiple facilities that they can house folks who only have a secret versus the majority of the folks that have a TSSCI? The answer is none, right? So as an example, obviously I'm a former intel officer, done a lot of work with NSA facilities. A lot of my soldiers who were brand new sinking soldiers, right, who were still at their interim TSSCI, but didn't have their poly and everything, we couldn't work, right? Because there was no facility by the NSA facility for them to be housed. So we would have to stick them, right? But we couldn't stick them in our analysis control element because guess what? It's TSSCI to skip. So we didn't even have the physical room to put them anywhere. So in many cases, what we would do is we would push them to the MI brigade and say, okay, hey, you know, unfortunately, go work in operations and do training schedules, because you can't employ them because you just don't have the physical space to do it, right? And Wayne's like this, he was exposed to that quite a bit, right, in his time. And so that is a challenge. So yes, security clearances are a challenge, not insurmountable, but when you start getting to the higher levels, it does become very difficult. And there's also a facility issue that comes with it that we can't figure that part out. The security clearance kind of, and who's sponsoring it, we've kind of figured out different ways to kind of work around that. I'll pause there.
Before you jump in, I want you to also talk about sponsoring, if you can, because this was the #1 question I would get from, you know, people that were highly qualified technically, but civilians and never served. And this was just the #1. Are you willing to sponsor my clearance? And it's like, I wish I could say yes. Some of the companies could, the smaller 8As, some of the smaller mid-size could, they had the bandwidth. But as we all know, you have to be aligned to a contract in order to do this, and it's really challenging. So if you could work that in, and please talk to that.
Yeah, sure. So you're right. I mean, that was a great summary, Cheryl, on it. Is, I mean, legally or technically, right, you have to be an employee. So it gets more difficult of that company, and the company has that 254 down trace to them, right? Now, one way we're doing it with smaller companies is, let's say Booz or HRI, right, or Kuikuilau, that smaller company comes to sub to them, and then you can down trace the 254, then they can sponsor your clearance. One path, right? The other path is what we do with P3I, because the actual program we fall under is the Chamber of Commerce, which is a nonprofit, and our OSE sponsor, the Griffiths Institute, actually has an FCL, right? That 254 can flow through them, through us, if our interns are technically on our books as our employees, right? right? So there's another method that we're doing that. The other method is we are, with some commands, who are willing to do the additional administrative burden is the commands themselves can put in the intern for a security clearance, right? I mean, like a user pack could say, hey, commander who signs off on it, right? So you theoretically can get an interim secret theoretically in 2 weeks, right? Because it's just, did you do all your paperwork? Did it get submitted? Did it get signed off? Now there's some legalities or policy issues for how long you can keep that interim secret. But that only gets you the interim secret, right? It doesn't get you the TSSCI. So those are some methods that we're kind of working out to get to at least address kind of the interim secret requirement. When we get to the TS, when folks are saying, hey, I want a TS intern, then unfortunately we have to find someone who already has a TSSCI because the timeline to be able to do that is just too long.
Yeah. And I'll remind the room that 10,000 people leave the military that could otherwise stay in Hawaii, 10,000 people against the 200,000 people that separate or retire from the military, and over 98.5 of them leave. So a good majority of the people are leaving. How could we potentially look at this differently so we contain them? I heard the Secretary of the Army speak openly about potentially, they're talking about making the PCS timeline not 3 but 5 years. Again, this is going to take years to implement if they do it, but how do we keep people in a place longer? As a workforce development person, I can tell you the longer somebody's in an environment, the more likely they'll stay. If their military spouse or their family dependents are working, which is our goal at the state, to really capture you. So that this highly cleared workforce isn't leaving, and that we're no longer the farm lead for places on the mainland who are looking to take that talent and offer them positions. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, thanks, Cheryl. So, Jason, you covered a lot of the contractual and I guess, blocking and tackling ways of getting that done on contracts. I think this is really a multifaceted problem, and we don't certainly have the time and the number of days probably even address it. But I think from the intern program, you know, we've done some successful intern programs. I know back when I was working with NSA, we bring people in going into their junior year, and you start the clearance process then. So by the time they graduate, they've got an SCI. I think we work with contracting officers and contract shops to say, hey, let's make this part of the contract, that this is going to be a thing, right? We're going to sponsor internships. We're going to keep them on the payroll the whole time so that, you know, we can achieve that. But I think there's also other ways to do it. I mean, I won't even touch the whole security background investigation process and all the delays that we could probably address. But I have seen some different parts of the country, you know, in South Dakota, University of South Dakota, I think has a SCIF. I think there's a university in Wyoming that's got a SCIF, right? So there's 30, 40 kids every year coming out of their schools with a TSSCI, and they've been working programs in a SCIF for years. I don't know if Hawaii has that. I don't know if the local schools do, but that might be a way to work with, you know, some of the commands here to sponsor that.
I'll rely on Bruce Allen to bring that up to the University of Hawaii. Mo, you looked like you wanted to say something, or Al, would you like to close this out? All right. Well, yeah, I want to thank you all. I want to give you a chance to meet these folks. If you've stuck around for the whole presentation and then some, I just wanted to say mahalo. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm. This will be on the docket for next year. I hope you're sitting at a panel with solutions, and that this time next year you've accomplished some of the things that we've offered to you. Please give yourself a warm round of applause.